Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
This is the podcast where every week we'll review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
And by pro wrestling event, we mean anything that isn't weekly TV. So it could be a pay-per-view, it could be a TV special, a home video release with original matches. All of those are in play for the randomizer, Jeremy, to tell us what we're going to watch.
That's right. Every week we take a list of those events, we fire up the randomizer, and it's going to pick an event literally at random that Adam and I are going to watch, and then we'll review that show.
Yeah, and I would say that this week's entrant that came out of the randomizer definitely fits that bill of being chosen completely at random. This is an older show, and definitely, I think for a lot of our listeners, and maybe for you as well, Jeremy, and even for me, a bit of an oddball show.
It is. I had not seen this show, was not familiar with anything on this show going into it. And so let me take this opportunity to bring everyone along with me on the journey that you and I had back to 1981. Big Time Wrestling was the North Texas wrestling territory of the National Wrestling Alliance, also known as the NWA. The promotion was run by Fritz von Erich and featured the Von Erich family as its biggest stars. In 1981, the local Christian broadcasting station began televising big-time wrestling shows and called the show World Class Championship Wrestling. The show featured rock music videos, musical ring entrances, and production values far ahead of what had been the industry standard. When Fritz von Erich was considering changing the company name, Mickey Grant suggested the name World Class Championship Wrestling as the name for the promotion. In 1981, business was picking up to where just 1 year later from the show we're about to review, Christmas in 1982, they were to set the promotion's gate record for a match between Ric Flair and Kerry Von Erich. The Star Wars events were the promotion's super shows. They would hold multiple Star Wars events during the year, usually on or close to Independence Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, and in this case, Christmas.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting points that, especially if you're a younger fan or just not overly familiar with days gone by for pro wrestling and the territory days, is that a lot of promotions, not just Big Time Wrestling / World Class, ran their major shows on holidays, particularly Thanksgiving night and Christmas night. Whereas now you might think, well, that's not something people are going to go do on a holiday night. That was the big thing to do in these territories. And a lot of times, as you said, drew their biggest gates. Jeremy, before we get into this show, I do have to mention that World Class Championship Wrestling was the first pro wrestling that I ever watched as a kid. I was born in 1981, so I was born about 7.5 months before this show took place. Clearly don't have any memory of this particular show. My earliest memories of World Class are probably late 83, early 84. Again, some of the earliest memories of just my life, much less pro wrestling. So this was an interesting journey going back and watching some of the guys that I watched as a kid, but seeing them a couple years earlier. And definitely seeing, you mentioned the production values that would be to come for World Class. They were not necessarily evident on this show.
That's for sure. This event is Christmas Star Wars from December 25th, 1981. We're in Reunion Arena in Dallas, Texas. The show opens with 2 rings side by side, and the matches will alternate, and the final 2 matches will use both rings.
No war games, though.
That's the first thing that everyone thinks of when they see the 2 rings. We're up for a war games, but no, we will have. We'll get to what the main events were later.
I love the way the broadcast started, by the way, with Bill Mercer talking about that there are 20 international wrestling stars here in Reunion Arena, and then he threw it down to ring announcer Mark Lawrence.
And we open with Ernie Ladd versus Jose Lothario. Yes, that Jose Lothario of
Super Sock.
and of coaching Shawn Michaels, managing Shawn Michaels fame.
Yes.
And Ernie Ladd, of course, I had no idea this match was going to be for the Brass Knuckles Championship, Adam. I was so
Yeah.
excited to hear that a Brass Knuckles Championship existed.
Yes, the championship and the philosophy behind the championship that Bill Mercer lays out is great. Of course, Big Cat Ernie Ladd, one of the biggest names in pro wrestling for many, many years.
And one of the biggest
Uh,
dudes. He was a big
yeah,
dude.
he was 6'9", and he is every bit of 6'9" in this match on this show. A former NFL great that transitioned into pro wrestling, and really a fascinating character, and a guy again that, like, when I grew up watching wrestling, it was world class and it was also Mid South. So I have memories of Ernie Ladd, Mid South, doing some commentary, doing some wrestling in Mid South. Uh, Ernie Ladd, he is an interesting guy to watch in the sense that, is particularly at this point in his career, he is slow. He is not particularly great in the ring on offense, which is weird for a big man. But he is, for a 6'9" guy, he has to be the best selling big man I've seen in a long time.
Absolutely. And he his height was really on display next to a guy the size of Jose Lothario. Yeah, so he was he really, he was a lot of punching and a lot of punching and kicking here, but yeah, the selling was fantastic. I have to say though, I hated this camera angle. The
Oh, just the hard. It's basically one hard cam that's positioned between the two rings. So whichever ring you're watching, it's going to be kind of at a weird off angle, except for the few matches where they had the hard cam pulled all the way back to for the shot to encompass both rings.
Yeah, oh, and I feel like they positioned it in the top of the upper deck, like all the way in the back, San Jose Sharks broadcast
I was
type
literally
of.
going to say the same thing. This is the San Jose Sharks broadcast of early '80s pro wrestling.
Yes, and then so it was positioned in the furthest part of the arena, and then they zoom in to the one ring
Yes.
that and then it's pointing to, so we're pointing the ring on the right side for this match, and
Yeah.
it's just, you feel off angle the entire
Yeah.
time, and I hated it. So we talked about
Yeah.
the slick production, and you mentioned this was not it. This was a shining example right out of the gate.
Brass Knuckles Championship. I want to mention Bill Mercer. If you're not familiar with him, longtime announcer, ring announcer for World Class. He to me was the highlight of this entire show. He is, it's an announcing style of days gone by. That style of, like, your friendly local newsman who happens to be calling pro wrestling, which was so common throughout most territories in those times. Really, the last guy that we ever had in pro wrestling do that sort of role as a play-by-play guy was the late Mike Hogwood on Ring of Honor on HD Net. Was kind of the last guy to do that. But he was great, Bill Mercer, on this show, talking about, for example, the Brass Knuckles title, and that it's one of the most revered championships in all of professional wrestling. And he even goes on to say that it's an inside thing in wrestling about violence in pro wrestling. And so this was just, it explained it great. And then he went on to say that closed fists are legal in a Brass Knuckles championship match, unlike other championship matches or other matches in general, and that you are allowed to tape your fists as much as you would like.
Which Ladd absolutely took advantage of.
Yeah.
This man had his fists taped up like they were almost boxing gloves. There was so much tape.
Well, the boxer thing too. This, in a lot of ways, I'm going to say that this match created the UFC 12 years early, because
Okay.
this was boxer versus football player. This is more UFC 1 than UFC 1 was. You had Jose Lothario, who they talked about, Bill Mercer talked about as being a former Golden Gloves boxer, I believe, or something. He talked about him being a boxer. He did the boxing stance. And then Ernie Ladd, obviously a football great. So we had interesting fighting stances from both. Other thing to note, Jeremy, just about the environment in which this match was taking place, or the show was taking place. There are no guardrails around the ring. They're basically just like the like cheap white, like, rope lines with posts.
Yes, if you went, your local Six Flags has more has more guardrails in place when you're waiting in lines in this place. That yeah, it was literally like a thin string just keeping the people back. Which we'll see. They couldn't have guardrails because they had to have fans all around the ring for autographs later.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
I was wondering what your thoughts were on that, because again, as a kid, that didn't seem weird to me because I watched World Class and that's what happened, particularly with the Von Erichs. And then when I, started watching different wrestling when I moved out of, I lived in Louisiana as a kid. So like I said, Mid South, which was based in Louisiana, and then World Class based in Texas. That's what I got on TV. So it wasn't weird to me until I started seeing other wrestling. In any event, yes, a very different environment. And this, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and we'll get there as when we talk about when we see the appearance of the Von Erichs later.
Yes.
In this match, I was watching. There was a lot of punching, a lot of choking from Ladd early. Ladd puts on a bear hug, and I found it interesting that the way he was cheating with this bear hug was that when the ref moved around so he couldn't see his back, then Ladd would grab the tights. And it was like it was like he was trying to give him a wedgie more than like
wedgie,
yeah. I didn't understand how the ref would circle around and then he'd be back to the tights, and apparently some sort of a cheating leverage move, but it looked more like he was about to give Lothario an atomic wedgie.
Yeah, it seemed more schoolyard bullying than your normal pro wrestling cheating. It also was interesting to me that before Ernie Ladd had a bear hug on Jose Lothario, which that makes sense because he's the big man. Lothario is a smaller man.
Sure.
About a minute earlier, Jose Lothario had a very, very brief bear hug on Ernie Ladd.
It was brief and not a good idea. Yeah, no.
No. It was, yeah. It did not work out well well, I won't say young Mr. Lothario because, for one, he possibly looked older here than he did when he managed Shawn Michaels in the mid-90s. I think that's a fair.
He
certainly didn't look any younger.
No, he's like J.J. Dillon in that he's been old my entire life. He's always been old and continues to look exactly the same and old.
Yes, even Bill Mercer had a very good line. And again, Bill Mercer is so calm, and I won't say deadpan, but just calm. He never gets overly excited, but he just casually mentions, he calls Jose Lothario like this young man, and then he catches himself and says, maybe not such a young man anymore.
and one more thing about Mercer and his greatness before we move on. He's alone in this booth, and he's talking to the audience like you're his color man and you're his play-by-play guy, and he's keeping you. He's having a conversation with the audience, but not speaking to a large audience. You feel like he's speaking one-on-one. I loved his delivery. It was fantastic.
Absolutely. He was almost like your personal narrator for this show as much as your play-by-play man.
That's a great way to put it.
So yeah, this match was it happened, I think would be the best way to describe it.
Sure. Lots of punches.
Existed. There were a lot of punches.
Thumb to throat. That was my highlight spot of the match.
There was also we had a lot of martial arts that wasn't judo on this show, described as judo.
Yes.
A judo chop, I believe, when Ladd jabbed him in the neck with something, a foreign object, an international object. And then out of nowhere, Jose Lothario hit a top rope punch and got the win. Jose Lothario was very excited to win this brass knuckles title. Ernie Ladd was beside himself and just sort of in shock that he had lost his championship.
Well, it was one of those pins where Lothario came off the top, like you mentioned, hit him with the punch. He gets the pin, but Ladd basically he kicked out at milliseconds after the three.
That's a classic wrestler move that if you're going to get pinned, kick out at 3.01 so you don't look bad. I feel like that was for the Japanese wrestling fans, that was a Riki Choshu special back in the day.
Absolutely. And we have a new Brass Knucks champion, and it's Jose Lothario.
Yes. At this point, I wrote in my notes as I sort of perused the crowd that they are half extras from the set of the movie E.T. and half cowboys in terms of how they dressed.
Yeah, that's a very apt description.
So that brings us to a match that was for what was described as the World Light Heavyweight title. And this was the first point in which we saw everyone crowded against the ring for autographs. Interestingly enough, this was El Solitario making his Texas debut, they said, defending his world light heavyweight title against Killer Tim Brooks, who is many things, but I don't believe that he's a light heavyweight.
I have that written down here as a point that Tim Brooks. I did not. I rewound it because I wanted to hear the weigh-in. Because I'm like, wait a second, what did they announce Tim Brooks' weight at? I rewound it. They did not announce a weight because he definitely looked big. He looked way too big to be allowed to challenge for this title.
He would be the biggest man on many modern day pro wrestling rosters.
The junior light heavyweight championship was the UWA championship from Mexico. So this was this was his first defense of that title, and they did not announce a weight for either guy. Important information for a light heavyweight match, and we were also alerted to the fact that Killer Tim Brooks, he loves dog chain matches.
Yes. Well, the full quote was that the Killer has all types of interests in his wrestling life. He's a rough and tough one. He likes to have dog chain matches. Again, Bill Mercer, unparalleled. And I'm not being sarcastic when I say that.
So good.
He also called Tim Brooks a big, robust man, which is very, very accurate. I wrote my interpretation or my take on the physical appearance of Killer Tim Brooks is that he was round and hairy.
Yes, facts. Yeah, those are both facts. You could already tell this match was completely different from a brass knuckles match when the two go for a lockup in what looks like it's about to be a test of strength, and then Solitario goes and hits a quick drop kick. Yeah. And Brooks ends up between the two rings, and then Solitario tries like a tope between the top and middle rope, but like barely hits him with like a headbutt. I guess it was not great. No,
and these men did not seem particularly familiar with wrestling each other. I thought as action went on this show, it wasn't the worst thing, and it was interesting. I always get a kick out of matches like this where you see a guy from like a totally different style of wrestling that almost seems like he teleported or time traveled into this old time era.
Yep.
Because again, this wasn't quite like seeing Tiger Mask on like I think it was like 82, like at a WWF house show at Madison Square Garden, like that video, but still. It's a 1981 Reunion Arena in Dallas. They had just seen Ernie Ladd and Jose Lothario, certainly not, wow them with any high-flying acrobatics. And then you see this great quick drop kick from Solitario. And then towards the end of the match, he hits a huge plancha from the top rope to the floor.
That dive, yeah. Then you could just see the quickness in that drop kick, the huge dive later. Yeah, it had to feel completely spectacular compared to the other things you saw on this show.
For sure.
The video quality of the show was also not great. It looked like during this match, it looked like. Do you remember when you'd adjust the tracking on a VCR?
Yes.
That we had some of those moments where it looked like they
tracking issues throughout. Yes.
They had to adjust the tracking, but it looked like that a few times, but that was fine. We were able to power on the view. This was in the left side ring, and the camera work was significantly better than when we have to be on the right side. So.
Yeah. So the right side ring too was much dimmer. Like if they were on the right half of the right side ring, you were having to guess a little bit as to what was happening.
Yeah, I'll have thoughts on that in the next match for sure. So the referee for this match, I didn't catch his name. I just wrote
Bronco Lubitsch. Oh man, Bronco
I just wrote
Lubitsch.
Father Time because Brooks went for a cover on Solitario, and the referee got on his knee and gently tapped the mat for a 2 count. And I'm like, what is this guy?
Bronco Lubitsch, his stomach never, in the history of refereeing, his stomach never touched the mat to go down for a count. It was pretty much exactly that. He was not fleet of foot at that point in his career. He had a long career. He's a Hungarian-born Serbian Canadian professional wrestler, manager, referee, and promoter. He was born in 1925, so by this point he was already let's see, he was old.
Yes,
Let's
that
do the math there. He was
that he was.
60. Yeah, he was not young. We'll say he was 56. Wait, he was only 56 at this point.
That's impossible.
How is that humanly possible? Yeah, he was born in 1925. My Brian Alvarez math tells me that he was 56 years old.
Jeez. There was an underrated awesome move from Killer Tim Brooks when he picks Solitario up and he punches him, quote, in the spine below the neck. I'm like, nice.
I haven't seen that too often. The spine punch.
That was pretty great.
There was also a great spot in here where, again, one of these weird things that I feel like we haven't seen anybody else really do. And again, it wasn't like anything groundbreaking, but he had Killer Tim Brooks had Solitario's head wedged in between in between the top and middle rope, like he had him tied, basically like scissored, and then he just started shaking the ropes wildly, and that looked unpleasant for Solitario.
The big flurry was sunset flip, 3 drop kicks.
Yes.
Posts Brooks on the outside, and then holy crap, Solitario on the top jumps over the post to the floor onto Brooks. Absolutely spectacular. After watching very slow early 80s wrestling, this was absolutely spectacular.
Yes. Well, and it was so spectacular that at first glance, just the spectacular nature of the dive itself apparently busted Killer Tim Brooks open.
Yes, he comes up bleeding.
But I'm guessing it was from him getting posted.
Yes, I think it was
before the dive, but I'm choosing to believe that it was the impressive nature of the dive, that it blew his mind and therefore a vessel in his forehead.
Both are absolutely plausible. And the bloody Brooks gets back into the ring. Solitario off the top with a not great crossbody, but still gets the pin. Still light heavyweight champion.
And then randomly, Al Madril comes in to congratulate him.
Al Madril comes out to celebrate with Solitario.
So there you go. Yeah, that was definitely, from an action standpoint, the better of the two matches. Killer Tim Brooks is, and we'll say this a few times on this show, there's some guys on this show that are sort of your classic garden variety, mid-card, late 70s, early 80s territory heel. And Killer Tim Brooks fits into that category.
We come back from commercial, and it's Fritz Von Erich versus Kabuki, is what the screen says. This is the Great Kabuki, and it's announced that this is the 6th event of the evening, and it'll be a Texas death match. Now, apparently they filmed other matches for television that would air throughout the weeks. One of those is why Al Madril was there. He actually teamed with Blue Demon earlier in the evening. So I was a little upset that we didn't get a Blue Demon match here. That would have been fun.
Yes, yeah. We get Blue Demon later in the Battle Royal, but we did not get the full Blue Demon experience that we could have out of this show.
No, but
we did get, however, we got Gary Hart.
We do. I love me some Gary Hart. I love me some Texas Deathmatch. This is going to be exciting. And I was waiting for the rules. The rules were explained. Both rings are in use. No DQs. The match goes until one man is physically unable to continue. Got it. I am ready. I am ready for a Texas Deathmatch. Fritz Von Erich has that horrible look. He's wearing a black T-shirt, black short trunks, and no knee pads.
It looks like he's half naked.
Yes, and he's old, so it looks like someone woke Dad up in the middle of the night, like the old man in his underwear look. I hate that. Ugh,
there was a serious Dick Murdoch vibe going on with Fritz Von Erich here, which again, not surprising. Fritz Von Erich, obviously the guy who ran the company, the patriarch of the storied and tragedy-filled Von Erich family. At this point, Fritz Von Erich had been the guy in Texas for a long time. For many, many years prior, he was, the dastardly German heel. He became the hero. And this was at a point where he obviously was still, a main draw. He was incredibly over. You look at the people rushing the ring to get his autograph was just, mind-boggling, particularly if you're not used to seeing that in pro wrestling. But we were also at a point to where the transition was taking place to his sons being, at least as much, if not more of a draw than he was. And that, is evidenced by the position on the card of him relative to that of his sons. Fritz von Erich, well, I'll just say about this match, it's not just Fritz von Erich. This match was fascinating to me because it was hate-filled. It was violent. I enjoyed some of the best hate-filled matches you'll ever see. Part of what makes them so great is that it doesn't seem like the wrestlers are entirely cooperating with each other, and we definitely had a little bit of that vibe here, which is good. We also had, to the best of my knowledge, I would have to really go back and watch. I don't know if there was a single bump in this match.
That's a good point. It's definitely it was definitely a lot of not a lot of cooperation, not a lot of like pro wrestling feel. It was somewhere between a fight and pro wrestling. It wasn't either. We did get to see Green Mist during the introductions. Yes. That got a big pop from my couch. Fritz, we were told that Fritz actually got the green mist in the eyes before. He had 25% vision loss in one eye because of the green mist.
Yes, he was forced to wear dark glasses as a result of this. And Bill Mercer, again my hero, said that Fritz had been, quote, blinded during a fracas with the Great Kabuki. And then he talked about this. I thought was great. I thought this was just perfect. And I'm not being sarcastic. This was such a great way to describe a man being, physically injured, blinded, and having to come back, fight his way back to take on the guy who took him out. Bill Mercer multiple times talked about Fritz von Erich having been on a road of vengeance, and that this road of vengeance led him to Reunion Arena tonight to take on the Great Kabuki. I thought that was fantastic. He also mentioned that the Great Kabuki had come out wearing a 300-year-old samurai warrior uniform.
Fritz, again, he was just wearing his black T-shirt, but it
was a crop top at one point.
he was going to take it. He was slowly taking his shirt off because he was worried about a sneak attack. Yes. And he was right, because as soon as that shirt comes over his head, Kabuki was right there to try to attack him. But Fritz knew that was going to happen. He was ready, and we were off. And quickly, he was going for the claw right away. Kabuki was able to block it, and I was shocked when I saw the abdominal claw come out. I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah, no, the abdominal claw was a thing that was used by the Von Erichs. It was used by Fritz von Erich. It was also, if my memory serves me correctly, in the New York territory, the WWF at the time, wasn't the stomach claw? Was that the Pepper Gomez deal? Somebody in that territory, I believe it was Pepper Gomez. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. Used the stomach claw, the abdominal claw.
And we've got Fritz throwing him over the top rope into the other rings.
Wait, first, we have our first sort of what the heck moment as far as the rules. This is a Texas death match.
Yes.
This is a no disqualification, no count out. You only lose if you can no longer continue match. And yet, when the stomach claw was applied by Fritz von Erich and the Great Kabuki got to the ropes, our guy Bronco Lubitsch called for the break.
Yes, yes, and that's not going to be the only time. I mean, we saw, we could see that when they were on the floor, the referee was doing a lot of admonishing for poking to the eye, even though there's no DQs. I was getting mad. I literally wrote, "Knock it off, ref," because he was getting in the way, doing a lot of admonishing that I did not care for.
After this admonishment and the abdominal claw was broken, Kabuki rolls to the apron and then just absolutely murders Fritz von Erich with a slap from the apron in. I love that. That might have been my favorite moment of action on this entire show.
Yeah, there's a lot of Kabuki's offense, you could see, the influence that Kabuki had on the Great Muta, and you could see, a lot of how a lot of wrestlers were influenced by the Great Kabuki and his
Absolutely.
And you could see that, they as they're out on the floor, the greatness of Gary Hart. He's also getting involved. We've got Fritz actually getting a claw on the head this time, and the place went berserk.
Yes.
For the claw, and Kabuki went down to his knees after a struggle, and then down to his back after the struggle continues, and Kabuki's bleeding somehow.
It's from the strength of the claw. That was not an uncommon occurrence when it came to a Von Erich claw. The tensile strength in their hands would squeeze a wrestler's forehead so tight that blood would come out of their forehead or their eyes or whatever.
And the next what the heck moment, the ref counts 3. What's happening?
Yes,
he's keeping and then he's keeping the claw on, and the referee's pulling him off, and he can't pull him off, and then he puts it right back on, and then we're told that Kabuki's going to get a 30-second rest period. What is happening, Adam? I'm wildly confused.
So that is, to the best of my memory, that was the rule set for Texas death matches back in the day, different than a last man standing match in modern wrestling, where you would have a pinfall or a submission, there would be a rest period, and there would be a 10 count. And if you didn't answer the 10 count, then you would be in trouble. And I would have to go back and watch, but I believe some variation of that rule set was even in play for the Vader versus Cactus Jack match at Halloween Havoc 93. I don't remember exactly, but this was not completely unfamiliar to me. It still felt a little bit weird, particularly with the way the Bill Mercer had mentioned it. A few things before we got to that first 3 count, though, that I sort of have written down here. Again, there's a judo thrust, there's a Mongolian chop, and I wrote down Fritz is not here to bump, and he certainly wasn't.
No.
Fritz at one point just unloads with a huge punch to the stomach, and Fritz, again, a lot like his sons, who particularly Kevin had a reputation for being not the lightest wrestler in the world in terms of how much it hurt when he hit you. As I wrote here, wrestling Fritz Von Erich must not have been fun. It certainly looked less than enjoyable. I also greatly enjoyed around this point in the match when Bill Mercer was talking about the martial arts prowess of the Great Kabuki. He talked about him having both educated feet and educated fingers.
Yes. I made note of that as well.
Which he put those educated fingers to work with a nerve hold under the armpit.
It's good stuff. Fritz also beat up Gary Hart, which was fun. Watching Gary Hart get beat up. They did, after the rest period, start the 10 count. Kabuki got back up before 10, and they're fighting again. Match continues. Fritz was in total command, back with the claw on the head again. The lighting, like we mentioned earlier, was so bad that the guys are in the corner of the ring, and it's completely pitch black. I can't see anything that's going on in the corner of the ring. Gary Hart was in the opposite corner, and he removes the turnbuckle covering. And Fritz comes over and immediately just rams Gary Hart's head into the exposed buckle.
Well, a quick aside to the turnbuckle pad getting taken off. I immediately thought of you and your love of Toru Yano of New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Thank you.
I'm being very sarcastic as I say that. Jeremy is not a fan of Toru Yano.
I'm not a fan, and that's it's our ongoing gag that I've seen Yano probably more than any other New Japan person live.
Yes.
So, I did not think of Yano, but thanks for bringing that up.
I did. I was going to text you, but it was like 1 a.m, so I figured the last thing you wanted to hear about at 1 a.m. from me was Toru Yano. So In any event, I did want to mention one other thing about this sequence, and I'm sure we're going to get to it. But so Gary Hart gets thrown into the turnbuckle connector, into the hook, connecting the turnbuckle to the post. Then Fritz then launches referee David Manning from one ring across to the other. It just looked like something out of like I don't know, like a Tom and Jerry cartoon, a Wile E. Coyote thing. Like, just it was cartoonishly great. Like, that was one of those great, like, completely overboard pro wrestling selling guy flying through the air things that you could depend on. Oh, yeah. Like, I thought he was gonna. Well, I was kind of worried he was gonna land into the dark side of the right ring, and then we would just never see him again.
Yeah, it was. That was a pretty spectacular. I also wrote down that that Fritz launched referee David Manning over both top ropes into that second ring. While he was dealing with Gary Hart and referee David Manning, the Great Kabuki was back and fighting again. All three men are down. Kabuki, he's back with his chokes on the apron. And then we the crowd starts going nuts again. Go, Fritz, go chants ringing throughout the building. One of those
things you could only hear at a wrestling show. Go, Fritz, go.
Yeah, people were going nuts for this. Fritz, he fights free. Both men are down. And the referee starts counting both men down. And neither man can answer the 10 count. I'm livid. I'm so mad. The official announcement comes in. There must be a winner. The referee says the first man in the ring that gets on his feet will be declared the winner. And so, quick thinking Gary Hart immediately just pulls Fritz out to the floor. Loved it. I'm like,
yes. Okay. Well, I just love the idea that if you remember, there was also the 30-second stopwatch was supposed to be happening kind of at the same time as this, apparently, but they just pretty much completely blew through that, which is fine. I love the idea of having both guys down on the outside of the ring or on the apron, and the winner is the guy who gets back into his feet and gets into the ring. It almost has got a bit of a TNA reverse battle royal deal going on, but I was totally okay with it. And then, yes, as you are going to describe, the finish, such as it was classic heel manager helping his guy, but it was in a different way than I recall seeing before.
Yeah, he pulls Fritz out to the floor. Gary Hart throws a soft drink into the face of Kabuki to revive him.
To wake him up. It was not quite the reviving elbow by Macho Man Randy Savage on Hulk Hogan.
No, or slapping the back of someone who was out in a sleeper to revive them. No.
Yes.
This was
a bit more real life of how you would revive someone than sort of the pro wrestling magic or the pro wrestling physics of some of those other revivals.
No, soft drink to the face, reviving Kabuki. Kabuki's up and is declared the winner.
And then immediately falls down. Like, he got up just enough to be declared the winner and then collapsed. And he was declared the winner, like you said. He was the first man to ever beat Fritz Von Erich in a Texas death match.
Yeah, Fritz Von Erich loses his first ever Texas death match. Merry Christmas, everyone. Here's
yeah.
What? Okay.
But then Kevin Von Erich comes in to make the save, such as it is, take out Gary Hart and the Great Kabuki. The Von Erichs still kind of stand tall, but yeah, Fritz Von Erich loses. And as I wrote, not a single bump in that match. But honestly, I don't care. Even with the weirdness of the rules, I was thoroughly entertained by this.
I didn't recognize Kevin Von Erich because he was wearing wrestling boots when he came out. I'm only used to barefoot Kevin Von Erich, so I had to do a double take there. But yeah, he did an awesome drop kick to Hart to the floor, tossed Kabuki out, and he lost under a cloud of suspicion and intrigue is how it was described.
Bill Mercer, again, just the greatest man alive on this night, on Christmas night, 1981. I have no doubt. Santa Claus, second place to Bill Mercer that Christmas.
Yeah.
This then led into the Von Erichs six-man tag, as it was Kerry Von Erich, Kevin Von Erich, and David Von Erich with young Mike Von Erich, who accompanied them, but then really was not to be seen that I noticed the rest of the match ringside or anything like that. He was introduced as their biggest fan.
Their biggest fan.
Mike Von Erich. And they took on Wild Bill Irwin, a very young Wild Bill Irwin, Frank Dusek, who
Frank
Dusek, yes, the captain, Frank Dusek. When I talked a little bit earlier about Killer Tim Brooks and the way I described him, it is tenfold that for Frank Dusek. He is the prototypical late 70s, early 80s, like mid-card to maybe upper mid-card heel, territory heel. Like he is that guy. Like he's rough and tumble, not particularly athletic, not particularly well built, but he fits the role perfectly. Their tag team partner was a man named Tengu.
Tengu.
And I have some notes here on Tengu just because it was.
That makes one of us. This. You can please do.
So I'll read a little bit about this. Hopefully it won't be too long. But the sinister Japanese heel seen teaming with Frank Dusek and Bill Irwin against Von Erichs for most of his time in Dallas-Fort Worth was played by Kazuo Sakurada, who was best known as Kendo Nagasaki in the Florida territory. He was not the first wrestler to portray the character of Tengu, however. In his TV debut on KTVT in mid-1981, the role of Tengu, who was heavily hyped prior to his arrival in the area by manager Gary Hart as being even more dangerous than the Great Kabuki, was played by a worker who was in no way convincing, either as a person of Japanese heritage or as a martial arts master, and in fact appeared to be somewhat elderly. By the way, this description is from WCCWmemories.blogspot.com. I'll continue. The actual match, a squash, came off so poorly that immediately after the commercial break, Bruiser Brody interrupted a promo with Bill Mercer for an upcoming card to declare that the man the fans had just seen in the ring was an imposter. And the story behind this is great. According to Gary Hart's son, Jason, the Kabuki character had been so successful that Gary, who was then booking for the promotion, was being pressured by others in the front office to create an equally menacing tag team partner for him. Hart, feeling that Kabuki's gimmick would be watered down by such a move, deliberately nipped the idea in the bud by bringing in an inferior worker for the debut. The identity of this fake Tengu, who appeared only in this one bout, remains a mystery. And that is not this match. This is the real Tengu in this match.
Yeah, we got the real one. I like to think somewhere down the road there was like an Undertaker versus Undertaker match, Tengu versus Tengu.
That might be the next Holy Grail. Now that was it Bret Hart and God, how am I drawing a blank on that? The match, Bret Hart and Tom McGee.
That's
now
right.
That Bret Hart and Tom McGee surfaced a while back, that got unearthed. Tengu versus Tengu would be the new Holy Grail.
The rules for this 6-man, because there's 2 rings, the rules are 2 men in one ring, 2 men in the other, and then 2 men will be in between the rings, and they can tag in to either ring. Got it.
This was wacky as hell, and I will say that this is one of those things that they may have mapped out and thought, this will be cool and different.
Nope.
Yeah, nope is right. This was so awkward because you had this was obviously an intense feud between the Dastardly Hills and the Young Von Erich brothers. But then you had in each ring, you had a brawl going on. And then you would have, let's say, David Von Erich and Wild Bill Irwin just in between the 2 rings with nothing separating them, but having to act like they couldn't get to each other. It did not work.
I did like when the ring announcer comes over the PA system to announce that children, you need to clear the ringside area.
Yeah. Because there was a mob.
There were so many people.
Hundreds of children were near the apron, trying to stand on the apron, trying to get in the ring, everything they could to have it looked like the Von Erichs sign their sheets of notebook paper from school.
Everyone pairs off, the match begins, and it was hard to follow at first because, again, one camera. So
yes.
Action's happening in one ring and we're focused on the other ring, and then it'll pan out and then it's too far away and we can't really see much, and it was bad. It was hard to follow, but we got a quick showcase for Kevin early with head scissor takeover, but then Dastardly Heels overwhelming him, double teaming, and then no idea what happened to the other ring because the camera zoomed in on the left side. But apparently, David helped out. He was constantly going after Wild Bill. Apparently, they were big rivals at this time. So it was David and Wild Bill. They were always paired off as much as possible, and it was just a weird 6-man with the 2 rings.
It really was. David Von Erich, I mean, at this time particularly, but really at any time, David was by far the best of the Von Erich brothers in ring. If you haven't seen him, but you're familiar with, and this isn't an exact 1-to-1 comparison, but to me, David, there's a bit of a Barry Windham vibe as far as him in the ring. He's very, very
Barry
good.
Windham,
yes, and particularly at that point in his career. But if things had gone differently and his life hadn't ended tragically, he would have been a major player in terms of the NWA World Title for a long time. He would have been in that mix. Meanwhile, like you said, Kevin Von Erich, he wasn't barefoot. He was wearing shoes, which was strange.
Yeah.
He might have actually been even more jacked at this point than Kerry was, which is crazy to see. Even though Kerry Von Erich was still a big muscular dude at that point, but Kevin was just huge. Kerry was, very green compared to the more polished we'd see of him, a few years later, but still he had that Kerry Von Erich mystique to him. We saw the Lake Dallas Shuffle, as they called it, which was what, if you've seen Kerry Von Erich even late in his career as Texas Tornado, when he'd have the guy by the hair and be getting ready to punch him and kicking the legs up and down in the air, that was in full effect. You mentioned the head scissors. That's one thing that was very evident that the Von Erichs liked using the flying head scissors. That was their go-to move when they were in a jam.
Yeah, and it's a cool move. I don't know why that move went away. Like that's a pretty good move. Get you out of some double teams too.
For sure, it's one of those moves lost to the sands of time. And then particularly Kevin had the very cool. He went up for the flying head scissors, and then on the way down, grabbed the side headlock takeover on, I can't remember which of the guys it was, but he hit both of those at the same time. That was pretty entertaining. We also had there was one point to where it was one of those spots that was a good idea in theory, but it didn't really work in practice, where Wild Bill Irwin and Frank Dusek were each whipped off the far side of the ropes on either ring, and then I guess the idea was for them to come together at the middle and their heads hit each other, but I don't think that they really factored in that the 2 rings, like there's space between the 2 rings, so it didn't quite work out. But it was, I guess, like the concept of this match itself, I guess an idea worth trying, but it didn't really pan out.
Yeah, one of the big spots was David having a sleeper hold on Dusek, and then Kerry came from the other ring, and he hits the ropes, dives over both top ropes into the second ring. David Manning-esque from the earlier match.
It really
flying in.
And David Manning actually got more air. I will say Kerry for a big man, Kerry, he did well. It was weird, because it might have been the only time I've ever seen a move that looked like a suicide dive happening in the ring, in that like he went over both ropes and hit him, but it was more of like almost a flying headbutt into the stomach is where he caught him. So it definitely wasn't a crossbody, but it was still impressive athleticism nonetheless.
Yeah, he only got the 2 count on Dusek. We continued on, and it broke down to where in action's happening in both rings, and in between the rings, everybody's paired off. And Kerry takes Irwin over, climbs to the middle rope, but not like the corner, but the middle of the middle rope for a knee drop and another near fall. But that was fantastic. Yeah, I was not expecting that.
No, nobody. That's another one of those things that you don't see anyone do, and it certainly isn't something I would have expected Kerry Von Erich to do. But yeah, it was really cool. It was a second rope knee drop, but like you said, not from the corner, from the middle of the middle rope. Very neat, very different.
Dusek suplexes Kerry over the top, back into the ring. He goes to the top, but misses a knee drop, and then Kerry starts working over Dusek's knee. Kevin's paired off with Wild Bill Irwin, who they keep calling Chauncey.
Yes,
Chauncey Irwin. Well, apparently that's his real name.
That's what I had written down, and Bill Mercer loved to tell us this, that yes, Wild Bill Irwin's actual name in storyline was Chauncey Irwin, but he went by Wild Bill because he didn't like that name. And then the fans found out that Chauncey was his quote unquote real name and taunted him relentlessly by chanting Chauncey. 1981, I guess.
That's right. Tengu gets in there. He tags in, comes off the rope, and Kevin catches him in the claw to the head, I have to preface. Catches him with the claw to the head. Place goes absolutely insane. They're going wild for another appearance of the claw. Irwin tries to interfere off the top. Kevin turns Goo into Irwin, who inadvertently hits him. Kevin with an elbow drop gets the pin. Von Erich's win. Everybody's happy on Christmas.
Yes, that saved Christmas after Fritz lost. I actually the finish I thought was pretty well executed. This match was, again, it was wacky. It was a very odd setup with the 2-ring 6-man tag, the guys in the middle of the ring. But it was fun. It's never not fun to see how over the Von Erichs are in Dallas. So that was enjoyable. There were a few other things I wanted to note about this match. One, another great Bill Mercerism where he talks about Wild Bill Irwin being, quote, a little nutsy at times. I enjoyed that.
Yep.
And then also we had early in the match, he mentioned they sort of went through the history of Tengu and why he was on this team. And he had mentioned actually that Tengu had recently been fired by Gary Hart and that he had been picked up by the captain, Frank Dusek, who was looking for new soldiers for his army to take on the Von Erichs.
We didn't have a graphic going into the last match. But back from commercial, we've got a graphic this time, and it says 16-man Battle Royal. This is our main event of the evening. The prize for the Battle Royal, $10,000.
Yes, and that's, again, in 1981 money, that's $10,000 is never anything to turn down, but in 81, that's solid stuff. So let's run down the list of luminaries. Yeah, run down the list of participants in this Battle Royal because there were men who we had already seen on the card. There were men who we hadn't seen on the card who, as you mentioned earlier, had wrestled on the show but were not on the broadcast.
Yeah, let's start with a guy we just saw. Tengu's in this Battle Royal.
There you go. If you needed more Tengu, he was right there for
you. Tim Brooks, El Negro Assassino, Richard Blood.
Yeah, Richard Blood. We'll do an aside here because when I looked at the lineup for this show and I saw Richard Blood, I got very excited. Not because it's a name made for wrestling. It's just, seriously, how does that exist? But because that is the name. That is Ricky Steamboat's name. That is the name that Ricky Steamboat originally wrestled under. So I'm sitting here thinking, damn, we're going to get young Ricky Steamboat here in this match. We're at least going to get that out of this Battle Royal. The Battle Royal starts. I'm looking around for Ricky Steamboat, like while these introductions are going on. I ain't seeing Ricky Steamboat. And eventually what I'm able to sort of discern is that the sort of, I guess the best way I would describe him is short Paul Orndorff guy in the match. That was the world-class Richard Blood. And here's the story. Again, this is from Frank Dusek via the WCCWmemories.blogspot.com site. He says, quote, Gary Hart just loved the name Richard Blood. In fact, he liked it so much he wanted to have a Richard Blood on the cards in Texas. For several weeks, all he told Bill Irwin and I was that we were going to get a new tag partner and we were going to call him Richard Blood. We knew it wasn't Tito Santana, who apparently went by that name at some point as well, or Rick Steamboat, but Gary assured us he would be a player who would live up to the name Richard Blood. Believe me, after all the build-up we gave fans on camera and all the build-up Gary Hart gave us in the dressing room, no one was more surprised than Bill Irwin and me to see Tommy Wright, who was an undercard worker in the Florida and Mid-South territories. The second week in the territory, we turned on Tommy, discharging him from our army. That led to the infamous headline in a Dallas program that read, quote, Dusek discharges blood, unquote. You gotta love Texas wrestling, end quote from Frank Dusek.
Richard Blood was wearing dark navy blue or black tights and knee pads. Almost had a young lion, New Japan look to him.
There you go. There you go.
We've also got Kerry Von Erich, of course, Jose Lothario, the aforementioned Frank Dusek, David
Armand Hussein.
Armand Hussein is there,
great
Wild
pro
Bill
wrestling
Irwin, Blue Demon, Carlos Zapata, David Von Erich as well, Al Madrill, who we saw celebrating earlier, and of course, Big Daddy Bundy, who was King Kong Bundy, but with hair and jeans on.
Yes, he was. This was as young as you could ever imagine King Kong Bundy having been in his life. He looked at least 20 years younger than that.
This guy, he's so young, so green, and so excited.
Yes, he was just filled with just pure joy and excitement to be in this battle royal. As the match went on, we learned that the Von Erichs liked young Big Daddy Bundy and had been teaching him some things. So apparently he was being groomed to be a friend of Von Erichs in their feuds and their exploits in world class. But yeah, he was wearing jeans, and then like the jeans were over what it looked like to be his normal
the classic
King Kong
Bundy
singlet.
Yeah, absolutely. The
But
classic Bundy singlet.
the hair was just throwing me off so much because he looked like King Kong Bundy, and then that hair was just, I don't know. It was just a buzz cut, but it was a short, it was, high and tight, but it just, King Kong Bundy with hair is just weird.
It's worth, if you were on the fence about whether to watch this show or not, if we haven't sold you on whether to go and watch this show, it's worth just watching the Battle Royal for Bundy and jeans and hair.
Yes.
The rules were all men starting in one ring. You need to be thrown over the top rope into the next ring.
Yeah, what you had to be thrown basically, and they didn't do a great job explaining this, but what the idea was that the Battle Royal started in ring one.
Yep.
Whoever was the last man standing in ring one would then sort of he could take a break. Well, then everybody would continue to Battle Royal in ring two, and then whoever was the last guy left standing after everyone else had gotten thrown over the top rope
over the top to the floor in ring two. It's being thrown into ring two to win ring one, and then ring two, you have to throw everyone to the floor to win ring two.
So clearly the strategy was to be the last guy in ring one, because you could make it to the final two without ever having thrown anyone
no one
to
over
the floor.
To the floor, correct.
if you were the winner of ring one. Whereas if you ring two is a hard road for this 10K.
So when one man remains in each ring, then they both get into one ring, and then it becomes just a battle royal with two dudes.
Yes.
And the winner will get $10,000.
A battle pedestrian, I guess. A battle commoner. A battle peasant.
So it's a battle royal. David Von Erich was the first one to be thrown into ring two. And then Killer Tim Brooks was in the second ring with David, and again is busted open somehow.
Yes.
So
80s wrestling, everybody.
Al Madrill and the Assassin are the four in ring two as it continues. Kevin comes flying into ring two, and so on and so on. You eventually got to the point where Big Daddy Bundy dumps Bill Irwin to win the first ring. Everybody's in ring two, and quickly Blue Demon, Armand Hossein are gone. Demon looks wildly confused on how he was eliminated, and so was I. I don't understand what happened.
This was so weird to me that you had Blue Demon on this show, and like this is what you did with.
Kerry dumps Dusek. Madrill over the top rope, grabs Assassin with head scissors, and he goes over the top. Both get eliminated. These eliminations were fast and furious here. There wasn't a lot of battle royaling in the second ring.
No, men in this battle royal were not getting paid by the hour
No,
on
they
this
were
show.
they were ready to get home for Christmas night here.
Very good
Uh,
point.
and you've got Kerry Von Erich gets Tengu in the sleeper, and then somehow both tumble over the top rope. This was also not good.
No, no, this was it. It appeared as though they were trying to tumble over the top rope, and if that's what they were trying to do, they were in fact successful in their endeavor.
So Big Daddy Bundy resting up in ring one. We're down to the final four in ring two. It's Brass Knuckles champion Jose Lothario, Carlos Zapata, Richard Blood, and of course, Wild Bill Irwin. Blood backdrops Zapata over the top, only to have Irwin grab Blood and just throws him over the top rope. So you're down to Irwin and Lothario. And then what I consider to be a shocking finish, Lothario goes for a punch, Brass Knuckles champ, and Irwin ducks, pulls the top rope down, and Lothario's momentum takes him over the top and eliminates him. So
I actually really like that. I thought that was, he's a boxer. He's going for the knockout punch here, but he misses, and it just the follow through. There was just too much energy and emotion from Super Sock, and it propels him out into the floor.
I was surprised to see Irwin winning the second ring. So Bundy versus Irwin for 10K. They announced that you win by, again, throwing the guy over the top rope to the floor. So no pins or anything. Irwin to the outside, goes to the other ring, and then
He huddles with his captain, Frank Dusek.
that's right, and goes to the other ring to lure Bundy in, and then he can attack Bundy in the middle as he was climbing into the
Yeah.
ring. So outsmarting the youngster.
A great veteran. Even though this is relatively early in Wild Bill Irwin's career, this was a great veteran heel move.
Bundy with his clubbing shots, back elbow. Bundy ends up missing a big elbow. Irwin's on the attack. Irwin's trying to dump Bundy, can't. They tell us that Bundy's a lumberjack from the Yukon.
Well, they said he was a lumberjack from the Yukon later. Earlier, they said he was a lumberjack from Alaska.
He was announced from Alaska, yeah, and then
So, and I know
now
they're
from the
both
Yukon.
north and cold, and I mean spiritually close, if not regionally close, but they're not in fact the same thing.
So they're back and forth trying to dump each other over. Bundy goes over but stays on the apron. Irwin gets his big
Which
head.
imagine that, by the way,
Right over.
Giant King Kong Bundy or giant less than coordinated Big Daddy Bundy at this point. Like I gasped when I saw, like when I could tell where this was going, and that he goes over. I'm like, there's no way this man is going to land on the apron and not tumble out. But to his credit, he holds on, and at that point, I don't know about you, but I'm like, I know exactly what is going to be
100%.
happening.
I've seen this finish so many times.
Yes.
Irwin gets the head of steam off the opposite ropes, charges at Bundy. Bundy drops down. Again, something you wouldn't expect to see. The agility of Bundy dropping down. And pulling the rope down, low bridge, Irwin over the top rope. Bundy is your winner. It felt like all the wrestlers except for Blood, Lothario, Irwin, and Bundy just wanted to get the heck out of there.
Yes.
And
Bundy was very excited when he won. He was the happiest roly-poly young man you've ever seen. To me, the most noteworthy thing about this match was that the second that this thing was over and the lights went up, everybody left immediately. Nobody stayed around to celebrate with Big Daddy
House
Bundy.
lights up, everyone hitting the exits.
Oh,
Absolutely.
like you have never seen people leave a show more quickly. Like, it's like, like the fans were upset with the way the show ended and they just, they left. They didn't stick around for the post-match promo. Not the case here. People were happy that Big Daddy Bundy won.
They were cheering on their way out the door.
Oh, yeah. But it was great, too, because as this happens, the house lights come up, the crowd or the camera pulls back to like show us how quickly everyone is leaving. It was an interesting production choice in 1981.
That's right. Fade to Black. That's your show. Best match for you, Adam.
Oh, God, that's putting me on the spot. I don't even know that this is a show where we can talk about a best match. I would say it's weird for me to say this in a match that literally had no bumps and had some weird rules to figure out as we went through. But I would actually say I enjoyed the Kabuki Fritz Von Erich match, the Texas Death match, the most, just because I got a kick out of seeing Kabuki, and then Gary Hart being Gary Hart, and just and Fritz losing a Texas Death match. I found that enjoyable.
I'm going to go with the Von Erich six-man. I also found that enjoyable, getting to see Von Erichs do Von Erich things. And it was highly enjoyable. I would also say the Solitario Brooks match was fun, but
Yes.
it was only like 5 minutes. So I would say the Von Erichs match was my favorite. Worst match for you?
Oh man, I don't want to. No, I mean, I guess you could probably say. I don't know. I guess you could probably say the Ernie Ladd Jose Lothario match, even though I
I have to
enjoyed.
say the Battle Royal. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, that's true. The Battle Royal. I guess if we're counting that, I guess we have to count it as a
Yeah, the
match.
main event.
No, yeah, I guess it didn't even register with me as a match, even though it was. No, yeah, the Battle Royal was like you said. You maybe had three or four guys in there that were had any interest in being there, and it was. I think the word to describe the Battle Royal would be perfunctory. And anytime your
Yes.
main event comes across as perfunctory, that probably should be the dud of the show. So yeah, at least the opener had Ernie Ladd selling.
Selling those points.
So
Yes, 100%.
that's that
And
that
a title
absolutely
change.
puts that
Yeah.
over. That's true. So yeah, I would agree. I would say the Battle Royal. It would be hard to have something worse than that on a show.
But a good show, fun overall. Uh, Absolutely worth your time. Under 2 hours to watch that show.
Yeah, I think it's actually the version of it that we watched was like an hour and 10 minutes. So it's a quick watch. It's a fun little time capsule into what was happening in Dallas in 1981 in the early 80s. And it'll sort of whet your appetite, like I said, for the much better things to come in world class, particularly when you get into 83 and you really get into the meat of the Von Erichs having real rivals in the Fabulous Freebirds, because it was clear the Von Erichs were what you were building that territory around for years to come, and they just needed to find the proper antagonists for them, the proper foils, and that would come down the line with the Freebirds.
Every single Thursday, we fire up the randomizer and we post on social media what event that week's episode will cover. So make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at WrestleAtRandom. Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom are all the places where we will post that on Thursday. And of course, WrestlingAtRandom.com is the website that has the entire back catalog of this podcast and all the links to subscribe. So please make sure you tell your wrestling fan friends, tell your Laps fan friends, please subscribe, rate, and review to help others find the show. It helps us work the algorithm so that others can find the show. So make sure that you do that. If you are thinking about leaving us a negative review, instead of doing that on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, why don't you just send us a tweet, interact with the show on Twitter, on Instagram, and all the social media platforms. Save the positivity for and those 5-star reviews for the algorithm. Help us work that out.
So there you go. Yeah, if we ever create T-shirts for the show, it'd be some sort of thing like hashtag Don't Hurt the Algorithm.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up this week. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. This was fun as always. Like I said, taking a step back to when I was only months old and experiencing what Pro Class Championship Wrestling was at that time. It's good times.
It definitely was great times. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And we'll talk to you again next time.